Venezuelan president announced the delivery of housing unit number 3.1 million as part of the country's Great Housing Mission. US President Donald Trump signed an executive order escalating his war on social media companies. The Tanzanian government summoned the acting US ambassador over recent travel advisories relating to COVID-19. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. The Venezuelan president announced on Thursday the delivery of housing unit number 3.1 million as part of the Great Housing Mission social program, a milestone that he explained was reached in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic.
Venezuela at this point is the only country in the world that in the middle of a pandemic we are able to deliver 100,000 housing units. Thanks to what? Thanks to the revolution's social programs funded by Commander Chavez, and thanks to the unredeemed and persevering spirit of our Bolivarian revolution.
And the Venezuelan president also reported that this Thursday a total of 82 new cases of COVID-19 were registered in the country, 2 of which were of local transmission and the rest were imported cases from Colombia. He also announced that the construction sector will be the first to be authorized to resume activities as the lockdown restrictions are lifted from June 1st.
One of the sectors that we are going to make more flexible is construction. As of Monday, July 1st, the construction industry will be able to go to work following safety protocols to resume all the works. Here is the protocol of action for the public and private housing sectors, for the prevention of COVID-19 and as protection to the workers, to the people's power organizations, and to the housing sector. Here is the protocol in detail, step by step.
During the last 24 hours, Chile registered over 4,000 new coronavirus cases that surpassed the total number reported by China, where the pandemic originated. The Chilean health minister informed that the COVID-19 death toll stands at 890. Over 3,000 health workers have been infected with the virus, a figure that was released a day after the Sebastián Piñera administration announced free life insurance for health personnel. At the national level, the occupation of critical beds stands at 86%, while in the metropolitan region, where the capital Santiago is located, the rate is 93%. In recent weeks, Piñera has been forced to replace his strategy of selective quarantines in some cities and areas with total lockdowns. Chile remains in third place in the Latin American region after Peru and Brazil. Ecuador's Ombudsman's Office demanded the government health assistance and COVID-19 testing kits for the Secoya indigenous community. The Ombudsman's Office made the call to provide immediate and appropriate preventive medical care and treatment for the community. The Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of the Ecuadorian Amazon reported on May 27th over 400 positive cases among Chichwa, Waurani, Achua, Shiwa, Shua and Secoya indigenous communities. Bolivian de facto authorities have confirmed the collapse of the health system in the department of Beni. Beni is the second most affected department by the pandemic after Santa Cruz, despite being one of the least populated with 500,000 residents. The first case of COVID-19 was detected a month ago, and the figure now exceeds 1,200 cases. Morgues and cemeteries have been overwhelmed by the advance of the pandemic, causing a number of bodies to be left lying in homes. Beni declared itself in a state of health disaster amid accusations of corruption motivated by the purchase of overpriced ventilators, as well as a lack of supplies and a shortage of health personnel. And social organizations in Bolivia, along with the Legislative Assembly, are demanding that the Supreme Electoral Court set a date for presidential elections that were supposed to be held on May 3rd. We have more in the following report.
Concerns have been raised among social movements over a legal complaint which challenges the constitutionality of a law which sets a 90-day deadline to hold Bolivia's elections. Those social movements demand that the Supreme Electoral Court immediately set a date for the delayed ballot.
Estamos esperando.
We want to hear from Mr. Salvador Romero. He needs to give a day and date for the elections. We make the electoral court responsible for any mobilizations. The Bolivian people can take to the streets because they want these elections.
The Constitutional Court has accepted 3 legal complaints issued by lawmakers representing the de facto government against the law that calls for elections within 90 days. Now the head of the Senate needs to argue in support of the law, and the Constitutional Court has 45 days to present a ruling.
We are waiting for the Supreme Electoral Court to provide us with the new date for elections, as it is expected of them. We have always respected the independence of our institutions, and we have to wait for the courts to do their duty.
Many suspect that this legal complaint by the de facto government is a scheme to further delay the elections and to remain in power unconstitutionally.
It is no coincidence that they are attacking the legislative bodies. They want to close down the assembly. That is why we have to warn the people. They need to be at the ready to defend democracy.
Social movements have declared themselves in a state of emergency until elections are held. But the de facto government continues to maneuver against the people's interest, all while the coup president and candidate, Janine Áñez, continues to place a distant third in all polls.
The Prime Minister of Barbados stressed on Thursday that time is not our friend, urging global leaders to take concrete steps to address the economic devastation caused by the novel coronavirus pandemic.
We have many middle-income countries in our region and in fact among the small states of the world. And many of us are excluded from access to concessional funding, even in the midst of this pandemic, when we need access to money to boost our health systems more than ever, when we need access to credit to be able to offset the dislocation that has come from zero revenue from tourism, zero revenue from air travel. And what we are not assured of is early access to rapid tests that will allow our countries to open back up safely and to ensure that our population is not exposed in a way that is injurious to them simply because we want them to have their livelihoods in tourism. We accept, therefore, that the time has come for more than words at this stage, because time is not our friend. And indeed, we hope that this session will bring the world to the commitment that there is need for a global leadership initiative.
More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. US President Donald Trump escalated his war on social media companies on Thursday, signing an executive order challenging the liability protections that have served as a bedrock for unrestricted speech on the internet. The move appears to be more about politics than substance, as the president aims to rally supporters after he lashed out at Twitter for applying fact checks to 2 of his tweets. Trump said the fact checks were editorial decisions by Twitter and amounted to political activism. He said it should cost social media companies their protection from lawsuits for what is posted on their platforms. A similar executive order was previously considered by the administration, but shelved over concerns it couldn't pass legal scrutiny and that it violated conservative principles on deregulation and free speech. 2.1 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits last week, for a total of 41 million in the past 10 weeks. Such jobless figures have not been seen in the United States since the Great Depression. The US Labor Department's monthly report provided the clearest picture yet of the breadth and depth of the economic damage sparked by the coronavirus pandemic. Job losses have been seen across the entire economy, affecting every major industry. Areas like leisure and hospitality saw the biggest losses in April, but even healthcare shed more than 1 million jobs. Low-wage workers, including many women and members of racial and ethnic minorities, have been hit especially hard. Protests have intensified in the US city of Minneapolis after video footage showed the murder of unarmed African-American George Floyd by 4 police officers. The attorney for his family denounced that Floyd was yet another victim of the widespread racism and impunity in the United States.
You want them to be arrested immediately, because we see them murder George Floyd while he's in handcuffs face down, and they literally cause him to die because they got their knee on his throat where he can't breathe. And so the family has never, ever been shy about what they want. They want them to be arrested and convicted for murder because they murdered George Floyd, their loved one.
New COVID-19 infections in Germany remained under last week's average as the number of confirmed cases increased by 353 within one day. The total now stands at over 179,000. The number of COVID-19 deaths in Germany increased by 62 to reach over 8,400 on Thursday, representing a mortality rate of 4.7%. Chancellor Angela Merkel said Wednesday that Germany's states could make independent decisions in light of regional coronavirus infection levels. France is reopening its restaurants, bars and cafes starting next week as the country eases its coronavirus restrictions. Although life is getting closer to normal, public gatherings of more than 10 people are still banned, as are contact sports, and nightclubs will remain closed. France, one of the world's hardest hit countries, has reported over 28,000 COVID-19 fatalities.
In the regions subject to particular surveillance, the Paris region, Mayotte and French Guiana, only the terraces of the cafes, bars and restaurants will be allowed to open on June 2nd. I'm fully aware that this is a restriction and a restriction that has serious consequences. We wanted to provide the French people with an additional tool, additional to the work of the health researchers. It's the mobile app Stop COVID. Stop COVID is not the magic weapon against the epidemic, but it's an added tool which enables us to fight against the epidemic and will enable us to fight even more effectively against it in the near future.
Russia reported its highest daily number of COVID-19 fatalities on Thursday at 174. Russia has reported the third highest number of coronavirus cases in the world after the US and Brazil. In total, more than 379,000 people have tested positive for the virus in Russia since the beginning of the pandemic, while the death toll stands at over 4,000. Russian authorities have informed that from June 1st, Moscow will reopen all non-food trade and some consumer services, and scheduled walks will be allowed for residents. President Vladimir Putin also announced that a military parade marking the 75th anniversary of the victory over Nazi fascism will take place on June 24th after being delayed due to the pandemic. Despite US threats and international criticism, China's National People's Congress approved a proposed new national security law for the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region this Thursday. The legislation, which aims to prevent, deter and punish acts in Hong Kong that threaten the country's security, was approved by more than 2,800 votes to 1, with 6 abstentions. The proposal seeks to sanction subversive and terrorist activities as well as foreign interference. The government bill announced in 2019 generated protests, which China has noted were supported by Washington to destabilize the region. And Chinese Premier Li Keqiang noted that the design of the national security law relates to the one country, two systems principle and supports Hong Kong's long-term prosperity and stability.
One country, two systems is China's basic state policy. The central government has all along fully and faithfully implemented the one country, two systems under which the people of Hong Kong govern Hong Kong with a high degree of autonomy. The central government has acted in strict accordance with the Constitution and the basic law of Hong Kong's Special Administrative Region, and stood firm in supporting the administration of the HKEASR government and the chief executive.
And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. The Tanzanian government summoned the acting US ambassador over recent travel advisories relating to COVID-19. Foreign Ministry Permanent Secretary Colonel Wilbert Iboj met acting US Ambassador Inmi Patterson at the Foreign Affairs Office in Dar es Salaam. The US Embassy said the risk of virus contamination remained extremely high in Dar es Salaam and in other parts of the country in an advisory issued on May 13th. But the Tanzanian Foreign Ministry said such claims were not true and were likely to distress and cause panic among Tanzanian citizens and foreign nationals. The Foreign Ministry Permanent Secretary also stressed that ambassadors were free to demand factual and official information before putting it out in public. Tanzania has recorded 509 COVID-19 cases, including 21 deaths and 183 recoveries, according to figures compiled by Johns Hopkins University. More than 5,000 people in Africa have tested positive for COVID-19 over the last 24 hours, marking the highest peak in a single day in the continent to date. The information was issued on Thursday by the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, adding that the new spike has brought the overall count to over 120,000 cases. Meanwhile, the number of deaths climbed to above 3,600. South Africa, Egypt and Algeria remain the worst hit nations. Ethiopia will soon have a COVID-19 field hospital on the outskirts of the capital, Addis Ababa. The health minister has said work on the facility is progressing rapidly and thanked the World Food Programme for its efforts and continued support. She added that the World Health Organization and the ministry are currently discussing how the hospital can potentially serve as a training centre for emergency medical response teams to benefit Ethiopia and the region. Meanwhile, Ethiopia started repatriating hundreds of its citizens working abroad who are stranded because of the coronavirus. The first 335 Ethiopians arrived back in the country from Beirut, with hundreds more expected to arrive over the weekend. Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, has put forward a controversial plan to assist struggling economies in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. However, the Special Envoy of the African Union has noted that while a debt standstill for low and middle income countries is welcome, such moves are not enough.
So what's happened is quite drastic and unprecedented. We've seen capital outflows. I had $90 billion. Kristalina just said $100 billion. So it's actually more than I thought. Absolutely unprecedented level of capital outflows, collapse of tourism revenues, collapse in commodity prices, particularly oil, collapse in activity, which leads to a very drastic reduction in government revenue at a time when expenditures are high and resilient, either for the debt service or for the health expenditures necessary to fight COVID-19. So in that context, we salute the decision made by the G20. The debt standstill. It's a very good first step, but more is necessary.
Algeria on Wednesday recalled its ambassador to France for consultations after documentaries about the North African country's anti-government protest movement were aired on French public television. The Interior Ministry said the filmed protests, including 2 broadcasts on Tuesday, seemingly spontaneous and under the pretext of freedom of expression, are in fact attacks on the Algerian people and its institutions, including the army. Citing the recurrent character of such programmes on French public TV, it singled out 2 documentaries broadcast on Tuesday by France 5 and the former colonial powers parliamentary channel. In its statement, the Algerian ministry cited what it said were malicious and lasting intentions on the part of certain circles which do not wish to see peaceful relations between Algeria and France after 58 years of independence. The death toll from floods that have been hitting Kenya has risen to 285. Authorities have also stressed that nearly 1 million people have been affected. The heavy rains observed annually at this time of year have wreaked havoc across the country, causing numerous flash floods and landslides. Kenya has also been affected by a plague of locusts that has devastated crops and by the COVID-19 pandemic that has so far resulted in 1,600 cases and 55 deaths. Swarms of desert locusts have devastated crops in India's heartland, threatening an already vulnerable region that is struggling with the economic cost of the coronavirus lockdown. The situation has been particularly grim in Rajasthan, where millions of locusts have been attacking crops since April. The insects are now appearing in locations where they had not been previously sighted, nibbling their way across large swathes of farmland in Punjab, Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat state. Meanwhile, authorities have estimated more than 50,000 hectares of agricultural land in 7 of India's central states have been affected.
If the swarm of locusts stay here for more than 8 days, they will start laying eggs. And if they start laying eggs, it will be very dangerous for us. Our first priority is that they don't stay here, and for this we are fully aware. We have arranged for bands to play in the villages to make sound so the swarm of locusts gets scared and leaves.
Iranian lawmakers on Thursday unanimously elected Mohammad Bakir Khalibaf, former mayor of Tehran, as the Speaker of the country's new parliament. Kalibaf secured 230 votes from the 267 lawmakers present at the parliament. He was the chief of Iran's law enforcement force from 2000 to 2005 and commander of the Air Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps from 1997 to 2000. Iran's new parliament for the next 4 years opened on Wednesday after the 11th parliamentary elections were held on February 21st. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has said that the traditional global economy and that of the Islamic Republic of Iran is changing to a digital economy. Speaking at a ceremony unveiling infrastructure projects of the Information and Communications Technology Ministry on Thursday, the President said Iran considers a digital economy an important area to develop. Rouhani pointed out the importance of Internet in providing people with services in areas like agriculture and health.
In the digital economy space, the use of cyberspace and the Internet to provide job services is faster, more accurate and less expensive, and this model is more reliable. In these difficult times of the coronavirus outbreak, people could further see the development of it, and many tasks and services were provided using the digital economy and cyberspace.
And on the occasion of World Environment Day held on June 5th, we finished this news brief with a video produced by the Chamber Orchestra of Havana to raise awareness on environmental protection. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.